Number 16, define apical meristem and identify the three types of meristems found in angiosperms and explain their purpose. Well, meristematic tissue in flowering plants is like stem cells in animal plants. It's the first cells of the embryo. And this meristematic tissue allows those flowering plants to grow throughout their life. Apical meristems are found at the tips of the stems and the roots, and they increase the length of the stem and the root. And they produce three types of meristem. And that produces three specialized tissues. They produce epidermal tissue, that's a covering, ground tissue that's internal, and then vascular tissue that transports water and nutrients throughout the plant. So let's talk about these three tissues. This epidermal tissue, this forms the outer protective covering of the plant. The epidermis has closely packed epidermal cells, and they are covered with a waxy cuticle to prevent water loss. And the root epidermal cells have the root hairs that we mentioned earlier. The epidermal cells of stems and leaves and the reproductive organs have what we call trichomes, which are hairs that protect them from the sun and moisture loss and also keep the herbivores from eating them. The lower leaf surface has the stomata, which are openings that allow for carbon dioxide to get in and oxygen to get out. In your older woody plants, that epidermis of the stem is going to be replaced by periderm. And this is a major part of cork. And new cork is going to be made by cork cambium, which is meristem. And the old cork cells just get sloughed off. You can look at these modifications here. In figure A, you see the root hairs that absorb water and also keep herbivores from eating them. In figure B, that's the stomata that lets the carbon dioxide in and the oxygen out so that photosynthesis can work effectively. And over here, this is the cork of an older stem in figure C, and that area that you see that's labeled lenticel, that's also for gas exchange. Now, looking at the ground tissue, this is the bulk of the plant. You've got parenchyma cells there that are the most abundant cells you find in all the organs of the plant, but it's also the least specialized. And they can divide and give rise to more specialized cells. You have collenchyma cells that have thicker primary walls that are found in bundles under the epidermis, and they give some flexible support to the immature areas of the plant. Then you have sclerenchyma cells, and this is going to be a thick secondary wall that's impregnated with lignin, and that makes that wall thick and hard. Most of the sclerenchyma cells are non-living, so their main function is support. And there's two types of sclerenchyma cells. There are the fibers that are long and slender, and the sclerids that are shorter, that we call stone cells. And you can see what I'm talking about with the stone cells. That's parenchyma in figure A, collenchyma in figure B, and sclerenchyma that are all part of the ground tissue. Now the vascular tissue of the plant, this is what transports water and minerals and the sugars, the organic nutrients of the plant. You're looking at it here, you're seeing what's called xylem. This is what transports the water and minerals up from the roots, that the roots absorb from the soil. If you look closely at this, you can see in the first two on the left, you can see where the tracheids are. Those are long and the ends are tapered, and the water can move across pits in the end walls and the side walls. And there's also these rows of tracheids that have vascular rays that can conduct water up the whole width or across the whole width of the plant. Then you also see that gray area the vessel elements. And these are larger. They have these perforated plates that you see over here in figure B. They're also called sieve plates in their end walls, and it provides a continuous way for the water to be transported up from the roots through the plant. Now, phloem is the vessel system, vascular tissue that transports the sucrose, the sugar, and other organic compounds that the leaves make during photosynthesis down the stem to the roots. And this is what the phloem looks like. You can see the sieve tube members, the dark bright blue color. Those are the conducting cells, and they are arranged in a continuous tube, and they have cytoplasm, but they don't have nuclei. The sieve plate is a cluster of pores at the end walls of the sieve tube members. And the sieve tube member has a companion cell that you see there in the gray. It has a nucleus, and it helps to transport the phloem. Plasmodesmata is a vocab term you need to be familiar with. This is cytoplasmic extensions in the cell walls that connect the two cells to each other. And it's a sieve tube member connected to a companion cell. Now, our roots, how are they organized? Well, there's a root cap where you find your meristematic tissue, your root apical meristem, and it's constantly replaced because it gets ground off by soil particles. There's a zone of cell division where you've got your primary meristems, and when the cells start lengthening and becoming more specialized, they're in the zone of elongation. And the fully differentiated cells that have the root hairs is in the zone of maturation. Now, looking at the eudicot or the dicot root, you've got, it's kind of confusing, so bear with me. This is also in your textbook, but you see the gray over here in the figure on the left? That's the epidermis, and that's the outer single layer of the root. It can have root hairs. If we look here in this middle picture on the right, you see it's a single layer of cells right on the right, and you see the root hairs. The cortex, where is the cortex? It's large, it's thin-walled, it's the yellow area. And it's got cells that are loosely organized and packed, and they have starch granules. So food gets stored in those yellow cells that are in the cortex, right under the epidermis. The endodermis is the pinkish looking layer, okay, right here. It's one layer of rectangular cells, and you can see it over here as well on the figure on the left. It also has attached to it, or you see running through it, if I can find my mouse, this red, that's called the Casparian strip, and that stops water and minerals from moving out of the root. Okay, they're going to move in, but then they're not going to be able to move out. It stops it, so it can't get in any deeper, okay, or get out. It's going to be able to go through, see the blue line going through, but it's not going to be able to go the other way and go out. And that's because it's got that lignin in it that makes it impenetrable. Then you have your vascular tissue. The first layer of cells of the vascular tissue is that green layer that's called the pericycle. And you can again see it over here. And then you can see the xylem, of course, is the red, and the phloem is the blue. So that's what a eudicot root looks like. Now, monocot roots, the ground tissue of the root is in the centrally located pith, and it has a vascular ring of alternating bundles of xylem and phloem. You got the same growth zones that we saw earlier in the Eudicot. You know, the zones of cell division, zones of elongation, and zones of maturation. But they don't have any secondary growth. They do have the pericycle, the endodermis, the cortex, and the epidermis, but they're not nearly as complex. So if you look at them, you can see how it's in a ring, and you've got alternate, see the ring, and you see it alternates with the xylem and the phloem. The xylem is the red, and the phloem is the blue. So it alternates in those rings.